Jasper, you can't just leave me like this. Not in this condition. I'm 6 months pregnant and you want to get on a plane and travel?
Cut the crap. You know I have a business meeting to attend with important clients. The deal is only 1 month. I'll be back very soon.
Jasper, you can't just leave me like this. Not in this condition. I'm 6 months pregnant and you want to get on a plane and travel? Her fingers gripped the edge of the marble counter until her knuckles went white. 89th floor penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling glass behind her. Soul spread out like a city that didn't care if she broke. Oh, please. Cut the crap, Jasper said, without turning. You know I have a business meeting to attend with important clients. The deal is only 1 month. I'll be back very soon. He adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror. The same cufflinks his grandfather wore the day he signed the deal that made the J family untouchable in Korea. Jasper, are you serious? How come I'm only hearing about this now? Her voice didn't shake, but it did crack on the last word. She swallowed hard and pressed her palm flat against her stomach, like she could hold herself together through the baby. Oh, please, I don't have to tell you my every plan. You're just my wife, nothing more. The room went dead quiet. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. April Wills let out a short, ugly laugh. The sound hit the glass and died. Just your wife, she repeated. She stepped forward, heels clicking slow against the floor. Funny, because when you needed a donor for your sister's bone marrow transplant, I wasn't just your wife. I was the only Black woman in Korea with a 98% match. I was the miracle. She stopped a foot from him. And when your father's company needed a front to win that Ghana port contract, I wasn't just your wife. I was the face of diversity. I was the PR campaign. I smiled for cameras while your lawyers buried the reports about the 47 dead workers. Jasper finally turned. His face was cold. Watch your mouth, April. No, she said. Her jaw was set. You watch yours. She reached into her bag and dropped a single envelope on the table. No USB, no drama, just paper. The meeting you're flying to Singapore for in 6 hours, the important clients? They're already here, in this building, and they're mine now. His eyes narrowed. You don't have the authority. I have your signature, she cut him off. Signed 3 months ago, the night you got drunk and told me you'd give me anything if I didn't leave you. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside is the transfer of 51% of J Global Logistics to my name. Effective midnight tonight. You're not leaving me, Jasper. You're being left. His phone buzzed. Then again. Then 10 times. April didn't flinch. She walked to the glass, rested her fingertips against it, and looked down at Soul. You wanted a wife who stayed silent? She said quietly. You got a woman who studied you for 2 years. And Jasper, I don't lose when I'm pregnant. The elevator doors opened behind her. They closed on his empire burning. Welcome, besties. If you're new here and you're into this kind of story, subscribe and like right now because you do not want to miss what happens next. April Wills locked the door to her office and let it go. She cried for 3 minutes. No sound. Just tears she'd held back for 6 months. Then she remembered who she was crying for. Herself. And the baby. She wiped her face once. Stood up. The woman who had been Jasper J's wife for 2 years stayed on the floor. The woman who would take J Global from him stood up. 3 months earlier, she had learned why. Jasper stumbled into the penthouse at 2 a.m, drunk. His phone rang before he reached the couch. She picked it up. A child's voice came through first. Appa, are you coming home? Then a woman's voice, colder. It's me, Eunice asking for her Appa again. When are you divorcing that foolish woman? Your family needs you here. April didn't speak. She looked at Jasper, passed out on the living room floor. Tie loose, phone face up on the carpet. She hung up. She was 3 months pregnant that night. She didn't shout. She didn't break down in front of him. She walked away and started planning. Now, back in her office on the 89th floor, the plan started. Kwon, former NIS, owed me a favor. I need everything on Kang Mi-yeon. Name, address, how long he's been lying. Bank records, property, travel history, 24 hours. No questions. She paused. If it exists, I want it. If it doesn't, I want to know why. The line went dead. He was right about one thing. She was just his wife. But she wouldn't be just his wife tomorrow. At 11:47 in the evening, Jasper J's phone stopped buzzing and started ringing. His lawyer, his father's secretary, the CFO of J Global Logistics. All of them saying the same thing with different words. It's gone. He sat on the edge of the bed in the hotel suite he hadn't meant to sleep in. Singapore felt 1,000 miles away and useless. 51% of J Global Logistics. Transferred at midnight Seoul time. Signed, sealed, or registered with the Financial Supervisory Service. His signature was on it. He didn't remember signing it. The night 3 months ago came back slow and ugly, drunk, angry, promising her anything if she wouldn't leave. He had signed a stack of papers without reading them. He thought it was divorce terms she wanted him to reject. He stood up and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked. Impossible, he said to the empty room. She can't do this. His father's name appeared on the screen again. He didn't answer. He knew what his father would say. You let a Black American woman outmaneuver you in your own house. You let her take the company your grandfather built. You let her make you look like the fool. Jasper looked at his reflection in the dark hotel window. He didn't recognize the man looking back. Downstairs, his car waited to take him to the airport. He wasn't flying to Singapore to meet clients. He was flying back to Seoul to beg the woman he called just my wife not to end him. The board meeting was in 9 hours. April Wills would chair it. The boardroom on the 92nd floor smelled like old money and fear. 9 men sat around the table. 3 of them had worked for J Global since before April Wills was born. None of them had ever looked at her when she entered the room before. Today, they stood up. She walked in at 9 o'clock in the morning sharp. No apology, no explanation. Behind her, 2 lawyers from Yoon Legal Partners carried a single briefcase. Jasper arrived at 8:59. Tie crooked, eyes red. He didn't sit at the head of the table. April did. Good morning, she said. Her voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. Let's make this fast. You've all received the filing. As of midnight last night, I am the majority shareholder of J Global Logistics. 51%. Controlling interest. Murmurs. One director started to speak. She cut him off with a look. Before you ask, yes, it's legal. Before you threaten, yes, I have the documents. Before you walk out, ask yourself who pays your bonus. She nodded to the lawyer. The screen lit up. Item 1. The Ghana port contract. The deal you were all congratulating yourselves for last quarter. 47 workers dead. Safety reports falsified. Fines pending from the ICC. Jasper J signed off on it. She paused. Let that sit. Item 2. Effective today, I am freezing all non-essential overseas travel for C-suite executives. Item 3. I am opening a full internal audit on every contract signed in the last 18 months. Item 4. I am appointing Kwon Hyun-sik as Interim Chief Risk Officer, former NIS. He doesn't take bribes. He doesn't like liars. Jasper stood up. His chair scraped loud against the marble. You can't just come in here and... I just did, April said. Sit down, Jasper. You're not the CEO anymore. I am. She slid a single document across the table toward him. Resignation as CEO, effective immediately. You keep your title as chairman, ceremonial, no votes, no access. Sign it, and I don't send the Ghana file to the press. His hands shook when he picked up the pen. The room was silent. Not because they respected her, because they understood. The takeover wasn't coming. It had already happened. April leaned back and looked at each director in turn. Now, who wants to discuss fourth quarter projections? 12 hours after the boardroom, Kwon walked into April's office without knocking. He didn't sit. He put a single encrypted drive on her desk and said, It's bad, and it's personal. The 89th floor was quiet. The new security team Kwon hired didn't ask questions. They just made sure no one got up here without a reason. April didn't open the drive right away. She looked at him first. Give me the short version. What do I use today? Kwon nodded. He'd expected that. Gone a port contract. Worse than you thought. Not just falsified safety reports. They paid off a local official to bury the 47 deaths. Payment trail goes through a shell company in Dubai. Jasper signed off on the final transfer. I have the emails. He slid a printed page across the desk. One email. Subject line, finalize Ghana. Make it clean. Sender, Jasper J. Recipient, CFO. April read it once. Her face didn't change. Good. That's public by 6 o'clock in the evening if he doesn't sign the resignation. Kwon kept going. Next, internal accounting. Last 18 months, at least 3.2 billion won moved to consulting fees for companies that don't exist. Most of it traces back to an account under Kang Mi-yeon's name in Singapore. Small amounts, regular intervals. Looks like hush money. Looks like child support. April's fingers stopped on the edge of the desk. Child support. Not officially, Kwon said. No legal filing, but the pattern fits. Monthly transfers started 11 months ago. Amounts increased after the first transfer. And there's this. He slid a second photo across the desk. It was grainy. Time-stamped 3 months ago. Jasper holding a toddler outside an apartment in Singapore. Mi-yeon standing beside him. April stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Run paternity. Already did, Kwon said. I pulled medical records from the clinic in Singapore. Jasper is listed as father on the intake form, but the DNA sample on file doesn't match him. Kid's not his. April leaned back. The anger didn't come first. Calculation did. So she's been using him for money, and he's been paying for a child that isn't his. Kwon nodded. And she's been telling him it is, which means he's been lying to you, to his father, and to himself for almost a year. April closed the folder. She didn't look at the photo again. Keep the child thing off the public file for now. We use it if she moves against us. The Ghana contract and the shell companies go to the FSS tomorrow. She stood up. Draft the press release. Internal audit reveals compliance violations. New leadership committed to transparency. No names yet. Let them sweat. Kwon hesitated. You want me to keep watching her? April looked at the door. Watch both of them. If she leaks, I want to know before the story goes live. If he tries to contact her, I want the recording. Kwon left without another word. April sat alone with the drive. She had the company. Now she had the truth. And she wasn't sure which one was more dangerous. Kang Mi-yeon was still in Singapore when the boardroom fell. She was in the 42nd floor suite at Marina Bay Sands, suitcases half unpacked, waiting for Jasper. He'd told her he was landing at 10:30 in the morning Singapore time for their month together. No April, no Seoul, just them and the kid. At 8:17 in the morning Singapore time, his driver called, Ms. Kang, don't come down. Mr. J isn't coming. New orders from Seoul. I'm to take you back to the airport. She didn't ask why. She knew. By 9 o'clock in the morning, Singapore time, she had it from her contact at Seoul Daily. J Global had a boardroom coup. April Wills is CEO now, and Jasper's out. She didn't know about the 51% transfer. She didn't know about Ghana. All she knew was she'd been cut off before she could get to him. She waited. No call from Jasper, no explanation, just silence. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Singapore time, 6 o'clock in the evening, Korea time, the press release hit. Internal audit reveals compliance violations at J Global. New leadership committed to transparency. Further details to follow. No names, but the timing was obvious. Mi-yeon stared at her phone in the empty suite. 11 months of transfers. 3.2 billion won moved to keep her quiet. And now April was about to use it. She dialed the reporter. Kimsey, if you want the real story, you'll need to move fast. April Wills didn't just take the company. She manipulated my husband to do it. I have emails. I have proof of her personal conduct. It was a bluff. She didn't have emails, but she had motive, and she had a public eager for a scandal. She hung up and looked at the crib in the next room. The kid wasn't Jasper's. She'd known for months, but Jasper didn't. If April went public with the money trail, Mi-yeon lost everything. So, she'd strike first. Upstairs in Seoul, April's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Kwon's report said Mi-yeon had made contact with the press 14 minutes ago. The war just started. The office went quiet the second Kwon's footsteps faded. April sat at the desk, the encrypted drive still unopened. Her phone had buzzed 14 minutes ago. Unknown number. Mi-yeon had made contact with the press. She should be planning the counterstrike, drafting the statement, calling the FSS. Instead, her hand went to her stomach. The pain came fast, sharp, low, like something twisting inside her. She gripped the edge of the desk, breath catching. For 3 seconds, she couldn't make a sound. Not now, not here, not like this. She slid out of the chair onto the floor between the desk and the glass wall. Seoul was still bright below her, indifferent. Her palms were damp against the carpet. Her first call was automatic. Dr. Lee, it's April Wills. I need you here, now. No explanation. She didn't give explanations to doctors. 89th floor? J Tower. Tell security you're with me. She hung up before he could answer. The second call she almost didn't make. But Han Ji-woo's voice was the only one she trusted that had nothing to do with J Global. The phone rang twice. April? You never call me after 9 in the evening. His voice was measured, like it always was. Former ambassador. Former Minister of Trade. The man who'd pulled her out of a mid-level policy role 8 years ago and told her she was wasted on memos. You said if I ever needed you, I'd know, April said. Her voice cracked on the last word. She hated it. I need you. Silence. Then he heard it, the break she couldn't hide. I'm on my way. 23 minutes later, the private elevator opened directly into her office. Han Ji-woo walked in first. 58 years old, lean, suit immaculate despite the hour. Behind him, Dr. Lee carried a small medical bag. Neither of them asked what happened. They saw her on the floor, back against the desk, one hand pressed flat against her stomach, the other fisted in the carpet. Han Ji-woo didn't speak. He knelt, checked her eyes, her breathing. Baby's moving? He asked quietly. April nodded once, small. Then we keep it that way. Dr. Lee went to work fast. Blood pressure cuff. Quick ultrasound from the portable unit. No words, just numbers, readings, the sound of the baby's heartbeat filling the room. April didn't cry until she heard it. Strong, steady, 148 beats per minute. The tears came quiet, no sound, just the way they'd come 3 months ago in the penthouse. Han Ji-woo sat back on his heels and watched her. You took the company today, he said, not a question. I know. And now you're bleeding out on the floor because you forgot you're human. April wiped her face once with the back of her hand. I don't get to forget, she said. You do, Han replied. For 10 minutes. That's why you called me. Dr. Lee finished, packed up. Stress contraction, no dilation. Baby's fine. You need rest, Mrs. Wills. Not boardrooms. He didn't wait for a reply. He left. Han Ji-woo stayed. Mi-yeon called the press 14 minutes ago, April said. It was the first thing she said that wasn't about the baby. I know, Han said. I got the alert. April looked up at him. Then you know I can't rest. Han Ji-woo stood, offered her his hand. She took it. You can't run a war from the floor, he said. So get up. We fix this. But not tonight. She stood, legs shaky. The pain was gone, for now. Han Ji-woo looked at her, really looked. You're still the woman I hired, he said. You just forgot it for a minute. April walked to the glass. Her reflection looked back. CEO of J Global. 6 months pregnant. Alone. I didn't forget, she said quietly. I just ran out of people I could call. Han Ji-woo didn't answer. He didn't need to. The war could wait until morning. Morning came without mercy. The sun hit the 89th floor at 6:14 in the morning, cutting through the floor-to-ceiling glass in long, pale slabs that reached the desk where April had fallen asleep in her chair. Han Ji-woo had left a throw blanket over her shoulders before he went. She hadn't heard him leave. She woke to three things at once: the ache in her lower back, the sound of her phone vibrating against the desk, and the headline already loading on the screen. Exclusive: April Will's hostile takeover. The manipulation behind J Global's fall. Seoul Daily. 5:47 in the morning. She read it standing up, blanket still around her shoulders. The article was clever. Mi-yeon's fingerprints were nowhere on it. The reporter, Kim Dae-jung, had positioned it as an investigative piece. Multiple sources close to the J family, painting April as a calculating outsider who had seduced a grieving man, used her pregnancy as a shield, and forged documents to steal a company that 3 generations of a Korean family had built from nothing. The word forged appeared 4 times. April set the phone face down on the desk. She went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 30 seconds. No makeup. Dark circles. 6 months pregnant and standing in the building she now controlled. She looked like a woman who had just survived the first night of a war. That was fine. She had survived worse. She picked up her phone and dialed Kwon. He answered before the first ring finished. She had never once heard him sound surprised. Seoul Daily, she said. I saw it. Kim Dae-jung has a source inside your legal team. One of the associates at Yoon Legal. I have his name. April was quiet for a moment. Fire him. Quietly. Then brief Yoon himself. I want a statement on record by 8 in the morning clarifying that the transfer documents were reviewed and authenticated by 3 independent legal firms. I want the FSS filing numbers included. Done. What's the board saying? Director Cho Sang-won called his lawyer at 5:50 in the morning. He's nervous about the Ghana audit going public. Director Park Se-jin sent flowers to your office at 6 o'clock in the morning. He wants a private meeting. April almost laughed. Take the flowers. Decline the meeting. For now. She walked back to the window. Seoul was already awake below her. Traffic threading through Gangnam like blood through veins. A city that had no idea what was happening on the 89th floor of this building. Mi-yeon, she said. Still in Singapore. Checked out of Marina Bay Sands at 3 in the morning. Private charter. Landed Gimpo at 5:15 in the morning. April turned from the window. She's here. Yes. Checked into the Signal under a different name. She has the child with her. The child. April's jaw tightened once. She thought about the photo Kwon had slid across her desk. Jasper holding a toddler outside an apartment. Mi-yeon standing beside him. The clean, domestic ordinariness of it. A family photo. Except none of it was real. Watch the hotel. If she makes contact with any board member, I want to know immediately. If she contacts the press again, I want the name of the outlet before the story runs. And if she contacts Jasper? April paused. She will. That's not the question. The question is what he promises her when she does. She hung up. At 7:30 in the morning, Jasper called. She let it ring 4 times. Then she answered. April. His voice was rough. She could hear it. The sleeplessness, the humiliation, the desperate attempt to reclaim ground with just the sound of her name. Jasper, she said. The article is under control. Silence. He hadn't expected that. You need to issue a retraction, he said. You need to tell the board it was a mistake. Tell them you were emotional, that you... I need to do nothing, April said calmly. You signed the papers, Jasper. I didn't forge anything. Your own lawyers authenticated the transfer. A beat. Then he found the angle he'd been building toward. The Ghana thing, he said. His voice dropped. If you release that, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy the company. The stock will collapse. Thousands of people lose jobs. There it was. April had expected this argument, had prepared for it the way a surgeon prepares for a complication. Not with fear, but with method. The Ghana thing is already with the FSS. she said. But I made sure the filing was structured to implicate the executives, not the company itself. J Global survives. You and 3 others don't. She hung up. She stood at the window for another moment. Then she walked to her desk, sat down, and pulled up the 4th quarter report. There was work to do. The press conference was at 10 in the morning. April had 3 hours. By 9 in the morning, the 92nd floor boardroom was already filling. Not the board this time, the media. April's communications team, assembled in 48 hours from a roster Han Ji-woo had provided, had called it a stakeholder briefing. 12 journalists, 3 financial analysts, 2 FSS representatives who had come quietly through the building's service entrance at April's request. Kwon stood at the back of the room. He always stood at the back. Han Ji-woo arrived at 9:47 in the morning and took the seat to April's right, wordlessly. He was in a charcoal suit that made him look like a former minister, which he was. His presence said things that didn't need to be said. April walked in at 10 o'clock in the morning exactly. She was in black, high collar. No jewelry except the small gold ring on her right hand. Not a wedding ring, but the ring her mother had given her when she left Atlanta for Seoul 6 years ago. She'd stopped wearing the wedding band on her left hand that morning. Not dramatically. She'd simply removed it, set it on the bathroom counter, and not looked back. She looked, objectively, like someone in control of a $4 billion company. She sat. She poured water into the glass in front of her. She looked at the room. Good morning. I'll keep this brief because I respect your time and mine. No wasted words, no apology for existing. The room adjusted. Yesterday, I assumed the role of CEO of J Global Logistics as its majority shareholder. The transfer of controlling interest was legal, documented, and authenticated. Any suggestion otherwise is false, and our legal team has already submitted the authentication records to Seoul Daily's editorial board. She paused. I expect a correction by end of day. A reporter from Yonhap raised his hand. She nodded at him. Mrs. Wills? CEO Wills. The article this morning suggests the takeover was personal. A domestic dispute framed as a corporate move. How do you respond? April looked at him evenly. J Global Logistics operates 340 freight routes across 18 countries. It employs 12,000 people directly and supports another 30,000 through contracted logistics. That is not a domestic dispute. That is a corporation. Another hand. A woman from Mi-yeon Business News. There are reports that the internal audit you mentioned is targeting executives personally, including your husband, former CEO, April said. The correction was quiet. Absolute. The room stilled. The internal audit is targeting transactions, not individuals. If transactions connect to individuals, those individuals will be named. That's how audits work. She let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. What I can tell you today is that J Global's quarterly numbers are sound, that our 4th quarter logistics contracts are fully intact, and that 3 major shipping partners have already confirmed continued engagement with the new leadership structure. She looked at the room. If your readers own J Global stock, they should know it's in more capable hands than it was 48 hours ago. She stood. That's all for today. She walked out before the follow-up questions started. In the corridor outside the boardroom, Han Ji-woo fell into step beside her without a word. Mail Business News will run something positive by tonight, he said. I know. She's been waiting for a reason to write about the company differently for 2 years. Jasper never gave her one. Han Ji-woo glanced at her. Are you going to eat today? April looked at him. I'm serious, he said. You're 6 months pregnant, and I watched you drink 1 glass of water in that room. I had breakfast at 7. What did you have? Han Ji-woo. What did you have, April? She almost smiled. Almost. Half a piece of toast and a vitamin. He didn't respond, but he redirected them toward her office's private kitchen with the kind of quiet authority she associated with men who had managed heads of state. She let him. She was tired, and the baby had been pressing against her ribs since 8 in the morning with the steady, relentless insistence of someone who also had an opinion about the situation. He made her eat a full meal. Rice, soup, a boiled egg. It took 11 minutes. He didn't talk business. She did. Twice, and he redirected her both times. When she was done, she looked at him across the small table. "You know she's here," April said. Han Ji-woo set down his chopsticks. "Mi-yeon, yes. She came back to fight, not to run." "No," Han agreed. "She's not the running type." "She's smart," April said. It wasn't a complaint. It was an acknowledgement, a military assessment. "Smarter than Jasper thinks she is," Han said. "But she's working with one asset, his attachment to the child. The child that isn't his." Han Ji-woo was quiet for a moment. "You're not going to use that." It wasn't a question. He knew her. April looked at him. "Not against the child. Never against the child." A pause. "Against her, if she makes me." Mi-yeon called Jasper at 11:22 in the morning from the Signal suite. Kwon had the number flagged. The call lasted 9 minutes. He sent April the transcript summary within the hour. She read it at her desk. Mi-yeon had told Jasper 2 things. First, that April was planning to go to the ICC directly about Ghana, bypassing the FSS. An escalation that would bring international criminal scrutiny on the J family name. Second, that if Jasper helped her access the board's private communications through his old credentials, she could build a case that April had insider traded the stock transfer. Both were lies. The first was designed to panic him. The second was designed to compromise him. April read the summary twice. Then she said it face down. She understood Mi-yeon now, she thought. Not fully. A woman like that was never fully legible. But she understood the architecture. Mi-yeon didn't love Jasper. She had never loved Jasper. What she had was a structure built on Jasper's wealth, Jasper's ego, and Jasper's willingness to be told what he wanted to hear. Now that structure was cracking, and she was doing what any intelligent survivor does when the building falls. She was looking for a new foundation. The problem was that Jasper was no longer a foundation. He was a liability. She just hadn't admitted it yet. April called Kwon. "Get me everything Mi-yeon used to build credibility with Seoul Daily. Not what she said, what she gave them. Emails, photos, documents, whatever made Kim Dae-jung feel safe running that story." "I already started pulling it," Kwon said. Kim Dae-jung was careful. He ran the story on sourcing, not documents, but Mi-yeon gave him 2 photos and 1 voicemail. "What's on the voicemail?" Pause. "You, from 9 months ago, arguing with Jasper at what sounds like a company event. You said, and I'm reading directly, 'If you embarrass me in this room again, I will burn everything you built.'" April was quiet. She remembered that night. Jasper had introduced Mi-yeon at a company dinner as a business associate and spent 20 minutes speaking only to her, while April stood 3 feet away, visibly pregnant, performing the role of silent, decorative wife. She had said it quietly, in the elevator on the way out, and she had meant it. She had not expected it to be recorded. "Is it real?" she asked. "It's real," Kwon said. "Undoctored. How did she get it?" Jasper's car had a recording system. He used it for business calls. She likely pulled it from his cloud account. April thought about that. Jasper, who had handed Mi-yeon access to everything without realizing it, his cloud, his accounts, his money, his name, because he trusted her the way self-important men trust beautiful, attentive women. Completely. Blindly. With the specific stupidity of someone who has never been told no. "Run it against the press freedom angle," April said. "Private conversation recorded without consent. That's not a source. That's evidence obtained illegally. Get our media lawyers on it. They'll argue public interest. Then we argue privacy law. And we leak the recording of Mi-yeon's call to Jasper from this morning. The one where she asks him to use his old credentials to access board communications." April paused. "Not to the press. To the FSS. A beat. That's wiretapping. She called his line. He's under active investigation. His calls are subject to monitoring as part of the audit process. Another pause. Make sure the audit authorization covers that. Kwan's silence had a particular quality to it. Not disapproval, but recalibration. The kind of silence that meant he was absorbing the strategy and finding it sound. Done, he said. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Jasper appeared in the lobby. April was on a call with the chairman of POSCO's logistics arm when her assistant sent the alert. She finished the call, set the phone down, and thought for a moment. She told her assistant to send him up. He looked worse than she expected. Not physically. Jasper J had the kind of face that photographs well in any crisis. A benefit of genetics and good tailoring. But there was something behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something unmoored. He looked like a man who had realized, slowly and too late, that the scaffolding had been removed. He sat across from her desk without being invited. April looked at him. She didn't offer coffee. The Singapore trip wasn't business, he said. I know. I've been with her for almost 2 years. I know that too. His jaw moved. He was waiting for her to perform something. Anger, heartbreak, tears. The feminine predictability he'd relied on. She gave him nothing. April, the child, she said. Her voice was level. Is he healthy? Jasper blinked. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't that. He stopped. Yes, he's fine. Good, she said. And she meant it. Whatever the child was or wasn't to Jasper, the child hadn't done anything. The child was real. The child was innocent. I want you to know, Jasper said. And something shifted in his voice. Something that sounded almost like a man who had practiced vulnerability and arrived here prepared to use it, that I never stopped caring about you. About us. I made mistakes, but Jasper. She said it quietly, not cutting him off exactly. More like setting the word down between them like a stone. I don't need your explanation. I don't need your remorse. I need you to understand one thing clearly. She leaned forward, just slightly. I have the Ghana file. I have the shell companies. I have 3 years of financial records that will bury you and take your father's legacy down with you. She held his gaze. None of that has gone to the ICC. None of it has gone to the international press. Not yet. He was very still. I don't want to destroy you, she said. I want the company to survive. That means I need you quiet, cooperative, and completely gone from this floor. His hands were flat on the desk, knuckles tightening. And if I'm not, he said. April looked at him calmly. Then I finish what I started, and your grandfather's portrait in the lobby is the last thing in this building that still carries your name. He stood up, his chair scraped. His eyes were wet in a way she hadn't seen before, and she recognized it. Not grief, not guilt, but wounded pride. The specific anguish of a man who had built his identity on power and watched someone surgically remove it. You were supposed to love me, he said. It was an ugly thing to say. Desperate. And she understood it. She understood him completely. In the way that 2 years of loving someone and watching them choose you last teaches you to understand them. I did, Aziz, she said. That's why I learned how to do this. He left without the resignation signed. But he left. The second press wave hit at 5:30 in the afternoon. Mi-yeon had released the voicemail. Kim Dae-jung ran it in a second piece that hit Seoul Daily's website at 5:32 in the afternoon. New recording. Did April Wills threaten to destroy her husband before taking his company? The clip was 22 seconds. April's voice, 9 months ago, low and precise. If you embarrass me in this room again, I will burn everything you built. By 6 o'clock in the evening, it had 400,000 plays. By 7 o'clock in the evening, the clip was on cable news. April watched it from her office with Kwan and Han Ji-woo. She watched it without expression, and when it ended, she looked at Han Ji-woo. How fast can you get me in front of a camera? She asked. Han Ji-woo looked at his phone. There's a live segment on Hanyang Business Network at 9 o'clock in the evening. I know the anchor. She's been wanting to interview you for a year. Call her, April said. Tell her I'm available. Tell her I have something to say. Han Ji-woo stepped out of the room. Kwon looked at her. The privacy lawsuit against Kim Dae-jung and Seoul Daily is filed. Our lawyers are moving fast. Seoul Daily's legal team called 20 minutes ago. They're nervous. Good, April said. Let them be nervous. She paused. Something tightened in her lower back. She shifted in her chair, pressed one hand flat against the base of her spine. The baby was still. That was fine. That was good. She breathed once, slowly, the way Dr. Lee had shown her. Kwon, she said. Yes. When Mi-yeon came back from Singapore, the child was with her. Yes? Where's the child now? Kwon considered. Still at the hotel. She has a nanny. The child hasn't left the suite since they arrived. April nodded once. Make sure nothing happens to that child. Whatever happens between Mi-yeon and me, whatever happens with the press, with the board, that child stays safe. Understood? Kwon looked at her for a moment. The particular look he sometimes gave her, not quite approval, not quite surprise, something quieter. Understood, he said. The Hanyang Business Network studio was cold and lit with the particular artificial brightness that made everything look both important and exhausted. April arrived at 8:45 in the evening. She'd gone home, changed, eaten dinner that Han Ji-woo had arranged sent to her apartment. She'd also taken a 40-minute nap, set an alarm, woken up feeling almost human. She was in dark navy now, clean lines, her hair pulled back. She'd put on makeup for the first time in 48 hours, not armor exactly, but the visual signal of deliberateness, of someone who was here on purpose. The anchor, Lee So-young, was 53 years old and had been covering Korean corporate news for 25 years. She stood when April walked in and shook hands with both of hers. CEO Wills, she said. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me, April said. The segment opened live at 9 o'clock in the evening. Lee So-young opened with the obvious. There's a recording circulating of you making what some are calling a threat. Your response? April looked at the camera for 1 second before she answered. That was a private conversation with my husband, recorded without my knowledge or consent in what appears to be a systematic violation of my privacy. She paused. Our legal team has filed a complaint with the Seoul Central District Court. We expect Seoul Daily to issue a retraction. But the words themselves, I'll burn everything you built. Context matters, April said. She let the words sit before she continued. I was 6 months into a pregnancy, standing at a company dinner where my husband spent the evening ignoring me and entertaining another woman in front of our colleagues and clients. She held Lee So-young's gaze. What I said was the honest statement of a woman who had reached her limit. It was not a threat. It was a boundary. Lee So-young was very still. Good journalist, listening. What I want to say tonight, April continued, is not about the recording. It's about J Global. 12,000 direct employees, 30,000 contracted partners, 18 countries. That company is my responsibility now, and I am asking every employee, every partner, and every shareholder to evaluate me not on 22 seconds of a private conversation, but on what I do with the next 22 months. She held the camera for one more beat. J Global is not going anywhere. Under this leadership, it grows. That is my commitment. The clip from the interview ran 2.3 million times by midnight. The narrative had shifted. Not completely. Nothing shifted completely overnight. But something in it had moved. The frame around April had changed. At 11:47 in the evening, Seoul Daily issued a partial retraction. Not of the story, not yet, but of the characterization that the recording constituted evidence of wrongdoing. Their lawyers had called first. At 11:52 in the evening, Mi-yeon's name began appearing in comment threads on the original article. Someone had leaked that the voicemail had been pulled from Jasper's private cloud without authorization. At 12:14 in the morning, April's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've won. You've only started what you can't finish. KM April looked at it for a moment. Then she typed back 2 words. Good morning. And she went to sleep. The next 72 hours moved like weather. At 9 in the morning the next day, Director Park Si-jin appeared in April's office with a proposal. Not flowers this time. An 11-page document outlining a new logistics partnership with Hyundai that had been stalled for 8 months under Jasper's leadership. He sat across from her, silver-haired, careful, and said, I'd like to work with you, CEO Wills, if you'll have me. April read the document while he sat there. All 11 pages. He didn't fidget. She respected that. This is solid, she said, but I want the margin renegotiated on the last 3 line items. Come back Friday. He came back Friday. She accepted the revised terms. At 11 in the morning, the FSS announced it was opening a formal inquiry into J Global's international consulting contracts, specifically the 3.2 billion won in transfers to non-existent companies. Specifically, the shell account in Singapore linked to Kang Mi-yeon's name. Jasper called twice during the announcement. She didn't answer. His father called once. She answered. Chairman Jae Sung-won had been CEO of J Global before Jasper. He was 71 years old, controlled a political network that stretched from the National Assembly to the Chaebol Roundtable, and had spent 2 years treating April with the particular brand of polite condescension reserved for women he considered temporary. His voice on the phone was careful, controlled, but she heard it beneath the surface. The thing he had never had to contend with before. Uncertainty. CEO Wills, he said. The title cost him something. She let it cost. Chairman Jay, she said, I'd like to suggest we meet, privately, to discuss the situation. I have Friday at 2 in the afternoon, she said. Here, my office. Silence. He had expected to name the location. He had probably expected a restaurant he controlled, or his private club in Hanam-dong. Your office, he repeated. Yes, she said. And she didn't elaborate, because she didn't need to. He came on Friday. Chairman Jae Sung-won arrived with 2 assistants and a lawyer. April received him alone. Just her, at her desk, with the Seoul skyline spread out behind her. He looked at the office, at the desk that had been his son's, at the woman sitting in his son's chair. He sat. I'll be direct, he said. Please, she said. This situation has damaged the family. The FSS inquiry, the press, the board instability. Whatever your grievances against my son, there are larger interests at stake. April nodded, listening. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement, significant. You transfer the controlling interest back to the family trust. You resign as CEO. In return, you receive a financial package that will ensure you and your child are provided for permanently. You sign a non-disclosure agreement and step away from the company. He set a folder on her desk. She looked at the folder. She didn't open it. Chairman Jay, she said, how much of your son's behavior over the last 2 years did you know about? He blinked. That's not relevant to the other child, she said. The one in Singapore. Jasper's been funding that arrangement through company accounts. You're the chairman. You see the quarterly summaries. She paused. I'm asking if you knew? A silence stretched between them. Long enough. I knew, he said carefully, that Jasper was not a faithful husband. Did you tell him to stop? I told him to be discreet. April looked at him, at the 71-year-old man who had built an empire on exactly this structure. The women who were quiet, the men who were forgiven, the money that moved silently through shells and accounts and non-disclosures. I understand what you're offering, she said, and I want you to understand something in return. She opened the folder, looked at the number, closed it again. If I wanted money, I would have taken it 9 months ago when I found out about Mi-yeon. I could have walked away then. I chose not to. She slid the folder back across the desk. I'm not here for a settlement. I'm here because this company has 12,000 employees who deserve leadership that isn't using corporate funds to manage a secret family, falsify safety records, and hide bodies in Ghana. Chairman Jay's face had gone still in a way that reminded her of Jasper. The same bone structure, the same learned composure. You would destroy everything my family built, he said. I would build something better on the foundation, she said. If you'll let me, if you fight me, I will finish the audit, send the full Ghana file to the ICC, and let the international courts sort out who bears criminal liability. She met his eyes. That file has your signatures on it too, Chairman, not just Jasper's. The room was very quiet. Outside, the white Seoul sky had turned gray. The first rain of the season moving in from the west. Chairman Jae Sung-won was quiet for a long time. What do you want? He said finally. Not a question? A surrender. April looked at him. Your public support. A statement to the board affirming the leadership transition. And your word that you will not fund or support any effort to destabilize this company's operations while the audit is underway. He stared at her. That's all? That's all today, she said. Friday to Friday is how I work. The statement from Chairman Jae Sung-won went out Saturday morning. 4 sentences. Formal. Enough. I have full confidence in the current leadership of J Global Logistics. The transition of executive authority was conducted in accordance with shareholder agreements. I support the internal audit as a necessary step toward corporate accountability. The J family remains committed to this company's future. The stock ticked up 4.3% by close of trading. Mi-yeon read the statement from the Signal suite and understood. She called Jasper once more. He didn't answer. She sat with the child asleep in the next room and recognized, with the cold precision of a woman who never wasted time on denial, that she had miscalculated the opponent. She had looked at April Wills and seen a pregnant wife. She had not seen the strategy or the patience or the 2 years of building that had been happening in plain sight. Mi-yeon was intelligent enough to know when she had lost. She started making calls, not to board members, not to the press. This time, she called her own lawyer. Kwan's alert came to April at 9 o'clock in the evening on Saturday night. Mi-yeon has retained counsel, signed a cooperation agreement with the FSS at 3 in the afternoon today. She's giving them the financial records from Singapore in exchange for reduced culpability on the shell company transfers. She's clean on criminal exposure in exchange for testimony. April read it twice. She turned on Jasper, she thought, not surprised. She had seen this possibility from the beginning. Mi-yeon's first and only true loyalty was to Mi-yeon. She typed back, "The child? Custody arrangement has been filed in Singapore. The child stays with her. No claim from Jasper. No claim ever made." April set the phone down. She thought about Jasper, about the toddler he thought was his, about the specific cruelty of that lie. Not to April, not to the company, but to him. She had spent 2 years watching Jasper, Jay make choices that treated everyone around him as instruments, and she had never wasted a moment of genuine pity on him. But this one landed differently. Just slightly. She went to the window. The rain was quiet tonight, the kind that falls in Seoul in late autumn without drama, blurring the lights below into soft halos. She pressed her fingers against the cold glass. The baby moved. A long, slow roll. She'd learned to read the movements over the last 6 weeks. The quick kicks of agitation, the long rolls of comfort, the stillness that meant sleep. This was comfort. "I know," she said quietly, to the baby, to the city, to herself. "I know." The FSS formal findings came out 3 weeks later. The compliance violations were detailed, documented, and damning. The report named 4 individuals: the CFO, the legal compliance officer, the VP of International Operations, and, at the last section, in precise institutional language, former CEO Jasper J., whose authorization codes appeared on the original Ghana payments. The ICC referral was announced separately, 2 days after the FSS report. International Criminal Court, the 47 dead workers, the falsified safety data, the buried reports. Jasper J. resigned his ceremonial chairmanship before the referral was made public. His lawyer negotiated the terms. He received limited immunity in exchange for full cooperation with the ICC investigation, which meant, in practice, that he would testify against the 3 executives and against the local official in Ghana. And in return, he would avoid prosecution himself, at significant cost to his family's reputation and to the last remnants of the story he had told himself about who he was. He called April the night before the ICC referral was announced, 2 a.m. She was awake anyway. She almost always was at 2 a.m. now. The insomnia of late pregnancy combining with the weight of everything else into a particular kind of alert restlessness. She answered. "I'm sorry," he said. Just that. 2 words. No preamble, no strategy. She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "I underestimated you." "Yes." A pause. "The baby," he said. "Are you—" "We're fine," she said. "Both of us." Another silence. The long kind. "I hope it's a girl," he said. "She'll be like you?" April looked at the window. The city below, quiet. 2 a.m. in Seoul was as close to silence as Seoul ever came. "Get some sleep, Jasper," she said. And she meant it without cruelty, which surprised her slightly. She hung up and sat in the dark for a while. Then she went back to work. There was always work. 8 days later, April Wills delivered her daughter in the private maternity wing of Asan Medical Center at 3:47 in the morning on a Thursday. Han Ji-woo sat in the waiting corridor for 4 hours without being asked to. He had a file of trade proposals and a thermos of coffee, and he worked quietly. And when the nurse came to tell him the baby had been born healthy at 3.2 kilograms and both mother and child were doing well, he set the file down and was quiet for a full minute. Kwon sent a single message. "Congratulations." April read it from the hospital bed at 6 a.m, daughter in her arms. The baby was asleep, face scrunched in the particular, concentrated seriousness of new humans making sense of oxygen. She was small and loud and real in a way nothing else had ever been. April looked at her daughter for a long time. She had spent 2 years learning how to be powerful. She had spent 3 months learning how to be cold. She had spent the last 4 weeks reminding herself to be human enough to keep going. Looking at the baby now, she understood something she hadn't quite understood before. This wasn't just about what she'd built. It was about what she was leaving. Every document she'd signed, every board meeting she'd chaired, every calculated move she'd made across the last months, it was all foundation. Not for herself, for this person. This small, sleeping person who had no idea what had been done in her name, and wouldn't for years. "You'll know eventually," April thought, "and I hope when you do, you understand." She named her Mi-yeon, a Korean name chosen carefully, in the city where she had found both the worst and the most defining years of her life. The character meaning auspicious, gracious. The J Global first quarter results came out 7 weeks after Mi-yeon was born. Revenue up 8.3%. Operating margin improved by 2.1 points. The Hyundai Logistics partnership, closed under April's leadership, had generated the company's single largest new contract in 6 years. The financial press covered it extensively. Lee So-young ran a full profile on HBN. The CEO, who took the company, saved it, and had a baby in the middle. April did one interview. 30 minutes. Lee So-young was careful and skilled. "There are people who say what you did was ruthless," Lee So-young said near the end. April looked at her. "I did what I said I would do," she said. "I built something better on the foundation. 12,000 people still have jobs. The Ghana families are receiving compensation through the ICC settlement fund. The company is profitable. The executives responsible for the violations are facing consequences. She paused. That's not ruthlessness. That's accountability. And personally? Lee So-young asked. What did it cost you? April was quiet for a moment. The kind of pause that television normally cuts. Lee So-young let it breathe. It cost me the version of myself that believed love was enough to protect me, April said. I don't think that's a loss, actually. I think it's an education. A pause. I have a daughter now. She'll be raised knowing that she doesn't need anyone's name to matter. She has her own. 6 months after the first quarter results, the board voted unanimously to confirm April Wills as permanent CEO of J Global Logistics. The vote was 9-0. Kwon stood at the back of the boardroom, as always. Han Ji-woo sat 2 seats down from her, as always. Seo-yeon was with the nanny on the 89th floor, having apparently decided that 9 in the morning was an excellent time to conduct extensive testing of her vocal range. When the vote was called, April sat still for a moment. Not from shock. She had known the numbers for 3 days. She had counted the votes, assessed each director, prepared for every contingency. But there was something in the moment itself that was different from the preparation. Something that asked her to simply be present inside it. She had walked into this boardroom 9 months ago with the signatures and the strategy and the particular cold fury of a woman who had been told she was nothing. She had sat down at the head of a table full of men who had never looked at her, and she had made them look. She looked at the vote results on the screen. 9-0. She took a breath. Let it out slowly. Thank you, she said. Not performance, not strategy. Just thank you. 3 floors below, at the exact moment the vote was confirmed, Jasper J's personal effects were being removed from his former office. The last item was a framed photo from his grandfather's signing day. The old patriarch, pen in hand, face composed in the certainty of a man who had made himself untouchable. The mover set it in a box without ceremony. In Singapore, Mi-yeon was testifying before the FSS panel for the 3rd time. She was composed, precise, cooperative. She had traded everything she had on Jasper for a clean exit, and she would take it because survival was the one thing she had never stopped being good at. The child, her child, no one else's, was with the nanny in a flat in Tanjong Pagar. He was 2 years old and had no idea about any of it. He would grow up with enough money because the Singapore custody arrangement had included a settlement fund that Mi-yeon had negotiated skillfully, and he would probably be fine, in the way children who are loved by complicated people are sometimes fine. April had made sure the fund was protected in the settlement, quietly, without making it a story. That evening, after the board confirmed her and the press calls were fielded and the closing documents were signed, April went home. The apartment she'd moved into after leaving the penthouse was smaller. The 37th floor, not the 89th. She'd chosen it deliberately. A place that was hers. Not the company's, not Jasper's, not the J names. She fed Seo-yeon, changed her, put her down in the crib by the window that looked out over the curve of the Han River, the water carrying the last of the evening light. She stood there for a while, watching the baby breathe. Her phone buzzed. Han Ji-woo. A message, not a call. He was like that. He understood when voice was too much. Dinner Friday? Celebratory. No business. I'll bring wine. You can drink 2 sips and lecture me about the rest. She smiled. It wasn't the small, controlled, almost smile she wore in boardrooms. It was real and quiet, and it reached her eyes. She typed back, Friday. You bring the wine. I'll bring the company reports. A pause. Then, I walked right into that. Yes, she typed. You did? She set the phone down and looked out at the river. Seoul spread around her in every direction. Lit up, relentless, a city that had tested her and not apologized for it. She had come here 6 years ago as a woman with an ambition she couldn't fully name and a belief that she could make something in a place that wasn't built for her. She had learned, expensively and precisely, what it cost to prove that to people who didn't want to believe it. She had the company. She had her daughter. She had the truth. She had not needed to burn everything, just the parts that were already ash. The Han River carried the light downstream. Mi-yeon slept. April Wills stood at the window of an apartment that was entirely hers, in a city that had once looked away from her, and she was still here. She was still here. And tomorrow, she would work. She walked into that marriage as his wife. She walked out as his boss. And she did it 6 months pregnant in heels, without raising her voice once. If this had you screaming the whole time, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. What would you have done in April's position?